Hi everyone, my name is Catherine, and I'm 68 years old. What I'm about to tell you might sound like something out of a movie, but I swear on my late husband's grave that every word of this is true. You guys are going to tell me if I'm crazy for what I did, but honestly, I regret nothing. Let me start from the beginning because you need to understand the whole picture to see just how twisted this situation really became. But wait until you hear what I discovered about my so-called loving daughter-in-law. It's going to blow your minds. I've been married to my husband James for 43 beautiful years before cancer took him from me last spring. 43 years of building a life together, raising our son Michael, and creating memories that I thought would sustain me through anything. James was my everything, my best friend, my partner, my rock. We met when I was just 22, working as a secretary at a small accounting firm downtown. He was this charming man who came in to get his taxes done, and somehow managed to ask me out before he left. The rest, as they say, is history. But here's what you need to understand about those 43 years. I sacrificed everything for my family, and I mean everything. I gave up my dreams of becoming a teacher to support James through his engineering degree. I worked 2 jobs while pregnant with Michael because we needed the money. I postponed my own education, my own career, my own dreams, also my family could thrive. Don't get me wrong, I don't regret it. That's what you do for love, right? But those sacrifices, they mattered. They shaped who I became. When James got sick, I became his full-time caregiver. For 2 years, I barely left his side. I learned to give injections, manage medications, coordinate with doctors, and somehow still keep our household running. Michael would visit when he could, but he had his own life with his wife Isabella and their twin boys. I understood. I really did. But those were the loneliest, most exhausting years of my life. After James passed, I felt completely lost. The house that had been filled with love and laughter for decades suddenly felt like a mausoleum. Every corner held memories that both comforted and devastated me. The silence was deafening. I'd catch myself setting to plates at dinner, or calling out to ask James if he wanted coffee. Grief, I learned, is a beast that attacks when you least expect it. That's when Michael and Isabella stepped in with what seemed like the perfect solution. "Mom," Michael said one evening about 3 months after the funeral, sitting at my kitchen table with that concerned expression he'd worn since he was a little boy. "Isabella and I have been talking. We don't think you should be alone in this big house. It's not good for you." Isabella nodded enthusiastically from beside him. She's a pretty woman, always perfectly put together, with this smile that never quite reaches her eyes. "Catherine, we have that beautiful guest room upstairs. It has its own bathroom, and you'd have complete privacy. Plus, the boys would love having Grandma around more often." I should have trusted my instincts right then. There was something about the way she said it, this forced cheerfulness that felt rehearsed. But I was grieving, lonely, and desperate for any connection to family. The idea of being around my grandsons, 8-year-old twins named Josh and Tyler, was incredibly appealing. "Are you sure?" I asked, looking between them. "I don't want to impose." "Mom, you could never impose," Michael said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Family takes care of family. Dad would want this." And there it was, the magic words that made my decision for me. James would want his family to stick together. He'd always been big on family unity, always talking about how blood runs thicker than water and all that. So I said yes. Moving in with them seemed like a dream at first. Their house is gorgeous, a sprawling 2-story colonial in the suburbs, with a perfectly manicured lawn and enough space for everyone. Isabella had decorated my room beautifully, with soft lavender walls and white furniture that made everything feel peaceful. She'd even put fresh flowers on the nightstand. "I want you to feel completely at home here," she told me as she showed me around that first day. "This is your space, your sanctuary. Make it exactly how you want it." The boys were thrilled to have me there. Every morning, they'd burst into my room before school, chattering excitedly about their dreams or showing me their latest drawings. We'd have breakfast together, as a family, and for the first time since James died, I felt like maybe I could be happy again. But you know what they say about things that seem too good to be true. The first sign something was off came about 2 weeks after I moved in. I'd brought several of my most precious possessions with me: family photos, James's watch collection, my grandmother's china, and most importantly, my jewelry collection. Not because I'm materialistic, but because each piece told a story. My engagement ring, the pearl necklace James gave me for our 20th anniversary, The diamond tennis bracelet I bought myself after Michael graduated college. The antique ruby pendant that belonged to my mother. But the crown jewel of my collection, and this is important for what comes later, so pay attention, was a stunning emerald necklace that James had given me for our 40th anniversary. It wasn't just expensive, though it was worth about $15,000. It was special because James had saved for 2 years to buy it, squirreling away money from his overtime work without me knowing. The jeweler later told me that James had come in every month for 6 months, asking questions, learning about emeralds, making sure he got exactly the right piece. Your husband wanted something that would match your eyes, the jeweler had said when I went to get it appraised for insurance. He said you deserved something as beautiful and rare as you are. That necklace represented everything good about my marriage. Every time I wore it, I felt James's love surrounding me like a warm embrace. It was my most treasured possession. I kept all my jewelry in a small wooden jewelry box that James had made me in his workshop years ago. It had multiple compartments and a tiny lock, though I'd lost the key years earlier. I placed it on the dresser in my new room, right next to our wedding photo. That Tuesday morning, I was getting ready for coffee with my neighbor from my old house when I went to choose a necklace. I opened the jewelry box and immediately noticed that my pearl necklace, the one with the intricate clasp that James had custom-made, was turned around backward. The clasp was facing front instead of lying against the back of the compartment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe I just put it back wrong after wearing it. But here's the thing, I'm obsessive about my jewelry. 43 years of marriage teaches you to take care of your precious things. I always put each piece back exactly the same way. Always. I stood there for a moment, staring at those pearls, feeling this cold dread creeping up my spine. Someone had been in my jewelry box. But who? Michael had his own key to the house, but he'd never go through my things. The boys were too young to reach the dresser, and besides, they wouldn't know to be careful with delicate jewelry. That left Isabella, I called out, walking downstairs with the pearl necklace in my hand. She was in the kitchen, wiping down counters that already looked spotless. She always seemed to be cleaning something, always in motion. Yes, Catherine, you look lovely today, by the way. I love that blue sweater on you. Thank you, dear. I was just wondering, did you happen to need something from my room? Maybe to clean or organize. Her smile never wavered, but I swear I saw something flicker in her eyes. No, I don't think so. Why do you ask? I held up the necklace. My jewelry seems to have been moved around. I'm very particular about how I organize things, and oh, she laughed, this bright, tinkling sound that somehow felt false. I'm so sorry. I was dusting yesterday and accidentally bumped your jewelry box. Some pieces fell out and I tried my best to put them back where they belonged, but I might have gotten confused. I should have mentioned it. I didn't want to bother you with something so small. It sounded reasonable. Completely reasonable. So why did every instinct in my body tell me she was lying? No problem at all, I said, forcing a smile. Just wanted to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. Never, she said, already turning back to her cleaning. You're sharp as a tack, Catherine. I hope I'm half as put together as you when I'm your age. I went to coffee with my friend Nancy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Nancy noticed immediately. You look troubled, she said over her cappuccino. How are things going with Michael and Isabella? I thought you'd be over the moon, living with those grandbabies. I am, I said quickly. It's wonderful. Really, it's just what? I told her about the jewelry incident, expecting her to reassure me that I was being paranoid. Instead, Nancy frowned. Catherine, honey, you've been organizing that jewelry collection the same way for as long as I've known you. If you say something was moved, something was moved. But why would Isabella go through my things? She has her own jewelry, beautiful pieces. She doesn't need anything of mine. Nancy stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Maybe it's not about need. Maybe it's about want. Or maybe. She paused, looking uncomfortable. Maybe what? Maybe she was just being nosy. Some people can't help themselves. They see a jewelry box, and they have to look inside. It doesn't necessarily mean anything sinister. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to my belongings. And that's when I noticed other small things. My hand lotion had been moved slightly to the left. The drawer where I kept my scarves seemed looser than usual, like it had been pulled out. and pushed back in. Little things that individually meant nothing but together painted a disturbing picture. Someone was definitely going through my things. I decided to test my theory. I have this little habit, maybe it's obsessive, but it's served me well over the years of placing things in very specific positions, so I know if they've been moved. So I started doing that with everything in my room. I'd place my reading glasses at exactly a 45-degree angle on my nightstand. I'd position my slippers so they were perfectly parallel under the bed. I'd arrange my perfume bottles in order of height. And every few days, something would be slightly off. The glasses would be straight instead of angled. The slippers would be crooked. The perfume bottles would be rearranged. But here's what really got my attention. It only happened on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the days when I went out for my standing appointments. Coffee with Nancy on Tuesdays, grocery shopping and errands on Thursdays. Isabella knew my schedule perfectly because she'd helped me establish it. You need routine, she'd said when I first moved in. It's good for mental health during grief recovery. I read an article about it. At the time, I'd thought she was being caring and supportive. Now I was starting to wonder if she was just mapping out when I'd be away from the house. 3 weeks into my little investigation, I decided to up the stakes. I took one of my less valuable necklaces, a pretty silver chain with a small pendant that James had given me for Christmas years ago, and I positioned it in a very specific way in my jewelry box. I coiled it into a perfect spiral, with the pendant sitting exactly in the center. No one arranges a necklace that way naturally. If someone picked it up and put it back, there was no way they'd recreate that exact pattern. Thursday morning came. I made a big show of getting ready for my grocery run. I'll probably be gone for a few hours, I announced at breakfast. I want to stop by the bank and then maybe browse around Target. You know how I get distracted in that place. Isabella smiled. Take your time. Enjoy yourself. The boys and I are going to work on their science project after school. I left the house at 9:30, drove to the grocery store, and then, well, this is where it gets interesting. Instead of going inside, I sat in my car in the parking lot and waited. I wanted to give Isabella plenty of time to do whatever she was going to do. At 11:15, I drove home. I came in through the front door as quietly as possible. The house was silent. Michael was at work. The boys were at school. I could hear Isabella moving around upstairs, probably in the master bedroom. I tiptoed up to my room and went straight to the jewelry box. The silver necklace was there. But it was no longer in its perfect spiral. Instead, it was loosely coiled. The way someone might put it back. If they were trying to be careful but hadn't noticed the original pattern. My hands were shaking as I opened the other compartments. Everything looked normal at first glance, but I knew better now. I knew exactly how I'd left everything. And several pieces had definitely been handled. But nothing was missing. That's what confused me. If Isabella was stealing from me, wouldn't something be gone? Why go through my jewelry repeatedly without taking anything? Unless, and this thought made my blood run cold. Unless she was waiting for something specific. I thought about the most valuable pieces in my collection. The diamond tennis bracelet was worth about $8,000. The pearl necklace was probably $5,000. But the emerald necklace, the one James had saved so long to buy me, that was the crown jewel, $15,000, but worth so much more to me emotionally. Was Isabella waiting for the right moment to take it? Maybe building up to it gradually, familiarizing herself with my collection first. I needed proof. Real proof, because if I was wrong about this, if I was just a paranoid old woman seeing threats where none existed, I could destroy my relationship with my son and grandsons. But if I was right, that night at dinner, I watched Isabella carefully. She was her usual, charming self, chatting with the boys about their school day, asking Michael about his project at work. She complimented the casserole I'd made and insisted on doing the dishes afterward. You cooked, so I clean, she said with that perfect smile. Those are the rules in this house. She seemed so normal, so genuinely caring. Was I losing my mind? Was grief making me paranoid and suspicious? But then, as she was clearing the table, I saw her glance toward the stairs that led to my room. It was quick, just a flicker of her eyes, but there was something calculated about it, something that made my skin crawl. I excused myself early that night, claiming fatigue. As I got ready for bed, I made a decision. I was going to catch her in the act, whatever it took. The next Tuesday, I prepared for the most elaborate performance of my life. I got dressed for coffee with Nancy, made sure Isabella heard me making plans on the phone, and announced that I'd probably do some shopping afterward. "Take your time," Isabella said, giving me a quick hug. "Enjoy your day out." I left the house at the usual time, drove to the coffee shop, and had a quick drink with Nancy. But instead of staying for our usual 2-hour chat, I made an excuse about feeling tired and left after 30 minutes. Then I did something I'd never done in my entire life. I parked my car 3 blocks away from the house and snuck back, like some kind of spy or criminal. At 68 years old, I was creeping through my own neighborhood, hiding behind trees and praying none of the neighbors would see me and think I'd lost my mind completely. I let myself in through the back door as quietly as possible. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I made my way upstairs, my heart pounding so hard I was sure Isabella would hear it if she was anywhere nearby. My bedroom door was closed, exactly as I'd left it. I pressed my ear against it and heard nothing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe Isabella wasn't going through my things after all. Maybe I really was just a paranoid old woman. But then I heard it. The faint creak of floorboards coming from inside my room. Someone was definitely in there. I stood frozen outside my own bedroom door, listening to the soft sounds of someone moving around my private space. My hands were trembling as I reached for the doorknob. Part of me wanted to burst in and confront whoever was in there. Another part of me wanted to run away and pretend this wasn't happening. But I needed to know the truth. I turned the handle, as slowly and quietly as possible, and pushed the door open just a crack. What I saw made my blood turn to ice in my veins. Isabella was standing at my dresser with my jewelry box open in front of her. She had my emerald necklace in her hands, holding it up to the light from the window, examining it with the focused attention of someone appraising its value. But what really made me sick was the expression on her face. Gone was the sweet, caring daughter-in-law who insisted on doing the dishes and worried about my mental health. This was someone else entirely, someone calculating and cold, studying my most precious possession like she was planning a heist. I watched, barely breathing, as she carefully placed the necklace back in its compartment and moved on to examine the diamond tennis bracelet. She was methodical about it, picking up each piece, looking at it closely, then putting it back exactly where she'd found it. She was cataloging my jewelry, learning the collection, planning. I don't know how long I stood there watching her, but it felt like hours. Finally, she seemed satisfied with her examination. She closed the jewelry box, looked around the room to make sure everything was in place, and headed toward the door. I barely had time to duck into the guest bathroom across the hall before she emerged from my room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of the TV turning on in the living room. Just like that, she was back to being the perfect housewife, probably settling in to watch her afternoon shows. I waited another 10 minutes before I crept back into my room. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it, but now I knew the truth. Isabella had been systematically going through my belongings for weeks, familiarizing herself with everything I owned. The question was, what was she planning to do with that information? But wait, this story gets so much worse than just a daughter with sticky fingers. What I discovered next changed everything I thought I knew about my family, and the revenge I planned. Well, let's just say Isabella got exactly what she deserved, but not in the way anyone expected. You guys aren't going to believe what happened when I decided to set my trap. Okay, so where was I? Right, I'd just caught Isabella red-handed going through my jewelry like she was window shopping at Tiffany's. But trust me, that was just the beginning of this nightmare. I spent that entire night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do next. Do I confront her directly? Do I tell Michael? Do I pack up and leave without explanation? Every option seemed terrible in its own way, but then I remembered something my grandmother used to say, "Catherine, sometimes you have to let people show you exactly who they are before you decide how to handle them." So I decided to wait, and watch, and let Isabella dig her own grave a little deeper. The next few days were torture. Sitting at the breakfast table with her, making small talk, pretending everything was normal while she smiled, that fake smile, and asked if I needed anything. The worst part was watching her interact with my grandsons, being this perfect, loving stepmother while I knew what kind of person she really was underneath. But you know what they say about patience being a virtue? Well, it paid off in ways I never expected. Thursday afternoon, I was in the garden watering my little herb patch when I heard Isabella on the phone in the kitchen. The window was open, and her voice carried clearly across the yard. At first, I wasn't really paying attention, I figured she was talking to one of her friends about some social event or whatever. But then I heard my name. Catherine's jewelry collection is more extensive than I thought, she was saying in a low voice. The emerald necklace alone is probably worth 15 grand, maybe more. And that's just one piece. I froze, the watering can still in my hand, water spilling over the edge of the planter. No, I can't just take it all at once, Isabella continued. That would be too obvious. But if I space it out over time, make it look like she's misplacing things. I mean, she's getting older, right? People will just assume she's becoming forgetful. My blood ran cold. She wasn't just planning to steal from me. She was planning to gaslight me into thinking I was losing my mind in the process. The best part is, she trusts me completely, Isabella went on, and I could hear the smug satisfaction in her voice. She actually thinks I care about her well-being. It's almost too easy. There was a pause, and then she laughed. It was the coldest sound I'd ever heard. Michael's completely clueless, of course. He thinks his precious wife is just being helpful by taking care of his lonely mother. He has no idea that Mommy Dearest is sitting on a small fortune that could really help us out. Help them out. I found out later that Michael and Isabella were in serious financial trouble. Michael's company had been struggling, and they'd maxed out their credit cards trying to maintain their lifestyle. Isabella's spending habits, the designer clothes, the expensive spa treatments, the luxury vacations had caught up with them, but, in that moment, listening to her plot to systematically steal from me while making me think I was losing my sanity, I felt something I hadn't felt since James died. I felt powerful. Angry, yes, but powerful. Isabella thought she was dealing with some helpless old widow who would be easy to manipulate. She had no idea who she was messing with. I figure I'll start small, she continued. Maybe the pearl necklace first. Then wait a few weeks and take something else. By the time I get to the emerald necklace, she'll be so convinced she's misplacing things that she won't even think to look for it. I'd heard enough. I quietly made my way back into the house through the front door, my mind racing with plans. Isabella was still on the phone in the kitchen, so I slipped upstairs to my room to think. That's when I remembered the last conversation I'd had with James before he died. He was heavily medicated, drifting in and out of consciousness, but he'd grabbed my hand with surprising strength. Catherine, he'd whispered, promise me something. Anything, I'd said, tears streaming down my face. Don't let anyone take advantage of your kindness. You're stronger than you know. If someone tries to hurt you, fight back. Promise me. I'd promised, of course, thinking he was just worried about scammers targeting elderly widows. I never imagined I'd need to defend myself against my own family. But James was right. I was stronger than I knew, and Isabella was about to find that out the hard way. I spent the next few days formulating my plan. It needed to be perfect, something that would expose Isabella's true nature while protecting myself and my grandsons. Because that's what really broke my heart about this whole situation. Those boys adored Isabella. They called her mama and ran to her when they were hurt or scared. How do you tell two 8-year-olds that the woman they love is a thief and a liar? The answer, I realized, was that you don't tell them. You show them, and you make sure everyone else sees it too. I started by doing some detective work. I called my insurance agent and had him send me detailed appraisals of all my jewelry. I took photos of every piece from multiple angles. I even made a video of myself going through the entire collection, describing each piece and its value. If Isabella was going to try to convince people I was misplacing things, I wanted documented proof of exactly what I owned. Then I did something that felt a little crazy but also brilliant. I went to the novelty store downtown and bought the most realistic fake rat I could find. I'm talking about one of those Halloween decorations that looks so real it could give you a heart attack if you weren't expecting it. It was about 6 inches long, gray and brown, with beady little eyes and a long, disgusting tail. But here's the genius part, this wasn't just any fake rat. This was a motion-activated rat that would start moving and squeaking if you touched it, the kind of thing teenagers use to prank their friends. I also made a trip to the bank and rented a safety deposit box. I moved all of my most valuable jewelry there, replacing each piece in my jewelry box with a realistic but worthless substitute. Cubic zirconia instead of diamonds, cultured pearls instead of real ones, and for the emerald necklace, well, I found a beautiful vintage costume piece that looked remarkably similar from a distance. The final touch was setting up my phone to record. I positioned it on my bookshelf, hidden behind some photo frames, with a clear view of my dresser and jewelry box. If Isabella was going to steal from me, I wanted video evidence. Everything was in place. Now I just had to wait for the perfect opportunity. It came the following Tuesday. I made my usual coffee plans with Nancy, but this time, I had a special request. "Nancy," I said during our phone conversation, making sure my voice carried to the kitchen where Isabella was pretending to read a magazine. "Would it be possible to push our coffee back by an hour? I have some errands to run first." "Of course, dear," Nancy said, playing along perfectly. I'd filled her in on my plan the day before, and she was more than happy to help catch Isabella in the act. Double quotes, wonderful. "I'll see you at 11 instead of 10. I hung up and made a big show of checking my calendar and gathering my purse. Change of plans, I announced to Isabella. "Nancy can't meet until 11, so I'm going to run to the post office and bank first. I'll probably be gone until at least 1 o'clock. Isabella looked up from her magazine with that practiced smile. "Take your time, I'll be here when you get back." "Oh, I know you will," I said, and I swear I saw something flicker in her eyes. Like she was wondering if there was a double meaning. In my words, if only she knew. I left the house at 9:30, drove around the block, and parked in the same spot I'd used before. Then I snuck back into the house through the back door and went straight to my room to start the recording on my phone at exactly 10:15. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Isabella was right on schedule. I hid in the guest bathroom across the hall, leaving the door cracked just enough to see my bedroom doorway. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid she'd hear it, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was it. This was my chance to expose her for what she really was. I watched as Isabella slipped into my room, closing the door softly behind her. I waited about 30 seconds, then crept closer to listen. I could hear her moving around, opening drawers, clearly searching for something specific. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sound of my jewelry box being opened, and then silence, followed by the most blood-curdling scream I have ever heard in my entire life. "Aha! Get it off! Get it off! Oh my God, there's a rat! There's a rat!" The screaming didn't stop. If anything, it got louder and more hysterical. I could hear Isabella stumbling around my room, presumably trying to get away from the rat that had started moving and squeaking the moment she touched it. "Help! Somebody help me! There's a rat in the jewelry box." This was followed by the sound of something crashing, probably my lamp, and more screaming. Within seconds, I heard Michael's voice downstairs. "Isabella, Isabella, what's wrong?" Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and I slipped back into the bathroom just as Michael burst into my bedroom. "What happened? Are you okay? What's wrong?" "Rat," Isabella sobbed. "There's a rat in your mother's jewelry box. It moved, it's alive." I peeked around the bathroom door and saw Michael standing in my doorway, looking completely bewildered. Isabella was pressed against the far wall, tears streaming down her face, pointing at my dresser with a shaking hand. "Honey, calm down," Michael said, walking slowly toward the jewelry box. "There's no rat. You probably just saw a mouse or something." "No," Isabella screamed. "It was huge, and it moved when I touched it. It's probably rabid." Michael reached the dresser and looked down at the jewelry box. I could see his face from where I was hiding, and the confusion was clear. He reached down and picked up the fake rat, which had stopped moving when the motion sensor timed out. "Isabella," he said slowly, "this is a toy rat." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" Isabella whispered. "It's fake. It's a Halloween decoration or something. See?" Michael squeezed the rat, and it started moving and squeaking again. I chose that moment to make my grand entrance. "Oh my goodness," I exclaimed, rushing into the room like I'd just gotten home. "What's all the screaming about?" I could hear it from downstairs. Michael turned to me, holding the fake rat, his face a mask of confusion. "Mom, why do you have a toy rat in your jewelry box?" I put on my best bewildered expression. "A what? I don't have any toy rats. Where did that come from?" "I found it in your jewelry box," Michael said. "Isabella was in here, and it scared her." Now came the moment of truth. I turned to Isabella, who was still pressed against the wall, her perfect makeup smeared with tears, and asked the question that would change everything. "Isabella dear, what were you doing in my jewelry box?" The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like a fish gasping for air. I thought I heard something," she stammered. "Like a noise. From your room." I came to check and decided to look in my jewelry box. Because you heard a noise, I asked sweetly. Michael was looking back and forth between us, clearly sensing that something was very wrong but not quite understanding what. Isabella, he said slowly, why would you open Mom's jewelry box to investigate a noise? That's when Isabella made her fatal mistake. Instead of coming clean or trying to explain, she doubled down on her lie. I wasn't going through anything, she snapped, her fear making her defensive. I heard scratching sounds, like there might be mice or something. I was trying to help. I was trying to protect Catherine's things. By opening my jewelry box, I pressed, maintaining my innocent tone. I thought the scratching was coming from the dresser. Michael set the fake rat down and looked at his wife with an expression I'd never seen before. It was like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Isabella, he said quietly, that doesn't make sense. If you thought there were mice in Mom's dresser, why wouldn't you call me? Why would you open her jewelry box? And that's when I played my trump card. Actually, I said, walking over to my bookshelf, maybe this will help explain what happened. I picked up my phone and held it up so they could both see the screen. I've been recording everything in this room for the past 2 weeks, I announced calmly. Every time someone entered it while I was away. Isabella's face went white as a sheet. Mom, what are you talking about? Michael asked, but I could see understanding starting to dawn in his eyes. Your wife has been systematically going through my belongings every time I leave the house, I said, my voice steady and clear. She's been cataloging my jewelry collection, learning what each piece is worth. Today, she came here to steal my emerald necklace. That's not true, Isabella protested. But her voice cracked as she said it. I pressed play on the recording. For the next 5 minutes, we all watched in silence as the video showed Isabella entering my room, going straight to the jewelry box, and methodically examining each piece of jewelry. The audio was crystal clear, you could hear her moving things around. Even her satisfied little hum when she found something particularly valuable. When the recording reached the point where she touched the fake rat and started screaming, I stopped the playback. The silence in the room was absolute. Michael's face had gone through a range of emotions, confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, heartbroken understanding. Isabella, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. What is this? What have you been doing? Isabella looked around the room like a trapped animal. She tried one more desperate lie. It's not what it looks like. I was just ... I was worried about Catherine. She's been acting strange lately, forgetting things, and I wanted to make sure her valuables were safe. But I wasn't going to let her twist this narrative any further. Isabella, I said, pulling out my phone again, would you like me to play the recording I made of your phone conversation last Thursday? The one where you discussed your plan to steal my jewelry and make me think I was losing my mind? Her face crumpled. The game was over, and she knew it. You recorded my private phone conversation, she asked weakly. I recorded a conversation that took place in my son's kitchen while I was gardening outside, I corrected. A conversation where you detailed your plan to systematically steal from me, while convincing everyone I was becoming senile. Michael sank into the chair by my window, his head in his hands. This isn't happening, he muttered. This can't be happening. But Isabella wasn't done fighting. Desperate people do desperate things, and she was about to show us just how low she could sink. Fine, she exploded. Fine. You want the truth. Here's the truth. We're broke. Michael, we're drowning in debt because of your mother. Michael's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Your precious mother with her medical bills and her constant needs. Do you know how much money we've spent on her since James died? The modifications to this house, the special food, the extra utilities. She's been bleeding us dry. I felt like I'd been slapped. Isabella, I've been paying you $1,500 a month for room and board since I moved in. That's more than my expenses cost. $1,500 doesn't cover everything, she shot back. And besides, you're sitting on a fortune in jewelry while we struggle to pay our mortgage. Michael stood up slowly, his face darkening with anger. So your solution was to steal from my mother, to make her think she was losing her mind? I wasn't going to steal everything, Isabella protested. Just enough to help us get back on our feet. She has so much stuff, she'd never miss a few pieces. Never miss them, I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. Isabella, that emerald necklace you were planning to steal. My husband saved for 2 years to buy it for me. It was the last piece of jewelry he ever gave me. It represents 40 years of marriage and love. And you thought I'd never miss it. The magnitude of what she'd been planning to do hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just theft, it was the destruction of my memories, my connection to James, my sense of security, in what I thought was a loving family. But you know what? In that moment, I also felt something else. I felt proud. Proud that I'd trusted my instincts. Proud that I'd fought back. Proud that I'd caught her before she could really hurt me. I want you to know something, Isabella, I said, my voice steady and strong. Every piece of jewelry in that box is fake. I moved all my real jewelry to a safety deposit box 2 weeks ago. So all your planning, all your scheming, all your careful cataloging, it was for nothing. The look on her face was priceless. Shock, frustration, and the dawning realization that she'd been outplayed by the helpless old woman she thought she could manipulate. Michael was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. I don't know who you are, he said quietly. The woman I married would never do something like this. Michael, please, Isabella began, but he held up his hand to stop her. No, just no. I need some air. I need to think. He walked out of the room, leaving Isabella and me alone together. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The perfect daughter-in-law facade was completely gone now. What remained was a desperate, angry woman who'd been caught red-handed. You think you've won, she said bitterly. But you've just destroyed this family. Michael will never forgive me, and it's all your fault. No, Isabella, I replied calmly. I didn't destroy this family. You did. The moment you decided to steal from me, to lie to my son, to manipulate my grandsons. That was your choice. Those boys love me, she said, tears starting to flow again. I'm the only mother they remember. And that broke my heart a little, because it was true. Josh and Tyler did love her, and they were going to be hurt by this, no matter how it played out. Then you should have thought about them before you decided to become a thief, I said sadly. The next few hours were a blur. Michael came back upstairs and told Isabella she needed to pack her things and stay at her sister's house while they figured out what to do next. She tried to argue, tried to apologize, tried to blame everyone but herself. But Michael was done listening. The boys came home from school to find their world turned upside down. Michael sat them down and explained, as gently as possible, that Mama Isabella had made some very serious mistakes and needed to go away for a while. They didn't understand, of course. How could they? 8-year-olds don't grasp concepts like theft and betrayal. They cried. They begged Isabella not to leave. They asked what they had done wrong. And watching those sweet boys suffer because of Isabella's greed and selfishness made me angrier than anything else she'd done. But you know what? Kids are resilient. And Michael stepped up in ways I didn't expect. He took time off work to be with them. He arranged for counseling. He made sure they knew that none of this was their fault. As for me, well, I realized that staying in that house was no longer an option. Too much had happened. Too much trust had been broken. The boys would always associate me with the day their world fell apart, and that wasn't fair to any of us. That's when I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. I called my daughter Rachel. I hadn't mentioned Rachel before because she lives on the other side of the country, in Oregon, and we'd grown apart over the years. Not because of any big fight or falling out, but just because life gets busy and people drift apart. She's a successful architect with her own firm, married to a wonderful man named David, and they have a teenage daughter named Amanda. Mom, Rachel said when she answered the phone. She sounded surprised to hear from me. Is everything okay? Actually, no, I said. It's not okay, but it's going to be. I told her everything. The whole story. From James's death to Isabella's betrayal to my elaborate trap with the fake rat. By the time I finished, Rachel was quiet for a long moment. Mom, she finally said, I had no idea you were going through all this. Why didn't you call me sooner? Because I thought I had everything under control, I admitted. And because I didn't want to burden you with my problems. Burden me. Mom, you're my mother. You could never be a burden. Listen, David and I have been talking about this for months. We have this beautiful guest house on our property that we never use. It's got its own entrance, its own kitchen, complete privacy. What would you think about coming to live near us for a while? I started crying then, not sad tears, but tears of relief and gratitude and hope for the first time in months. I would love that, I whispered. Good, start packing. I'm booking your flight today. And that's exactly what happened. Within a week, I was on a plane to Oregon with my real jewelry collection, safely in a new bank, my fake jewelry donated to a local theater group, and my dignity intact. The fake rat. I gave it to Josh and Tyler as a going-away present. They thought it was hilarious and spent the afternoon trying to scare their father with it. Sometimes laughter really is the best medicine. Michael filed for divorce 3 months later. Isabella fought it at first, but the video evidence of her attempted theft made her realize she had no leverage. She moved back in with her parents and got a job at a department store. I heard through mutual friends that she tells people Michael's crazy mother destroyed their marriage, but honestly, I don't care what story she tells herself to sleep at night. The boys come to visit me in Oregon every summer now. They love my new place. It's got a beautiful garden, hiking trails nearby, and Rachel's daughter Amanda has become like a big sister to them. They're doing well in therapy, and they're starting to understand, in age-appropriate ways, what really happened. As for me, I'm happier than I've been in years. Rachel and I have rebuilt our relationship stronger than ever. I have my own space but family nearby. I volunteer at the local library. I've joined a book club, and I'm even taking a pottery class. And every night, when I put on my emerald necklace before dinner, I think about James and smile. Because I kept my promise to him, I didn't let anyone take advantage of my kindness. I fought back, and I won. But here's the real lesson I learned from all this, and I want you guys to remember this. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're being paranoid or overly suspicious. You know yourself better than anyone else knows you, and sometimes, the people who seem the most helpful, the most caring, the most concerned about your well-being, those are the ones you need to watch the closest. Isabella thought she was dealing with a helpless old widow who would be easy to manipulate. She learned the hard way that this widow has claws. Now, tell me honestly, do you think I was too harsh with my revenge? Should I have just confronted her directly instead of setting up that elaborate trap? And what would you have done if you caught your daughter-in-law trying to steal your most precious possessions? Let me know in the comments, because I'm still processing everything that happened. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. One thing I know for sure. I sleep so much better at night knowing that my real jewelry is safe. My family knows the truth, and I'm surrounded by people who actually love and respect me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just getting out and building a better life for yourself. And that fake rat. Best $15 I ever spent. Trust me, you guys, sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And sometimes, a little plastic rodent is all the ammunition you need to expose a liar and a thief for what they really are. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone else who might be going through something similar. You're stronger than you think, and you deserve to be treated with respect and honesty, no matter what your age or circumstances. Now I'm off to make dinner with my real family, the ones who love me for who I am, not what I own. Take care of yourselves, and remember, always trust your gut. It usually knows what it's talking about.